I was looking through some crime stats the other day, and something caught me off guard. Turns out, the caliber that's tied to the most deaths in the U.S. isn't some big, scary round as you'd think. It's one a lot of folks carry every day. Kinda makes you stop and think. So yeah, let's cut through the hype and actually look at what the numbers say. What's up, everyone? This is your boy Ted from Line 45, and today we're talking about something that caught me off guard. You always hear folks arguing about what caliber is the deadliest. People throw out the 45, 10mm, and even rifle rounds like 5.56. But the one that's actually behind the most deaths in the U.S.? Yeah, it's not even close to what you'd expect. Before anything else, let me do this quick plug. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, all the buttons that you can see below. Don't forget to leave a comment too. I know it feels like a hassle, but those things help my channel a lot. Now let's get back to the good stuff. Most people, when you ask them what the deadliest caliber is, they'll toss out stuff like 45 ACP, 10mm, maybe 44 mag if they're feeling dramatic, or 5.56 because, well, ARs. And I get it. Those rounds sound deadly. Big recoil, big muzzle flash, big reputation. Movies, video games, even a lot of folks on forums make them out to be the end-all be-all when it comes to knocking someone flat. You hear the term quote-unquote stopping power thrown around like it's gospel. But in the real world, that's not really how it goes down. Most of those big calibers don't actually see much action outside of the range or backwoods. I mean, yeah, they hit hard, but they're not what people are carrying day to day. A full-size 10mm or .44 Magnum ain't exactly pocket-friendly, and they're not cheap to shoot either, so most people just don't train with them much. The calibers that end up in the most shootings are the ones that are everywhere. Small guns, easy to carry, cheap ammo, stuff you'll find in a drawer or waistband, not in a holster on some gear junkie. That's the disconnect. Folks think deadliest means the biggest hole or most energy, but what actually racks up the numbers is what gets used the most. Doesn't matter if it's got 1,000 foot-pounds of energy if it's sitting in a safe. The rounds you see showing up in real crime scenes are way more common than they are flashy. All right, let's get into it, and I'll tell it to you straight, the way I would if we were leaning over the counter talking guns and coffee. I've been around this stuff a long time, and one thing that's always bugged me is how folks argue over what the deadliest caliber is, without ever looking at real numbers. Once you dig into the hard data, FBI crime stats, ATF trace reports, CDC fatality numbers, it tells a whole different story. The calibers tied to the most deaths in America are actually the ones considered tame. I'm talking about the 9mm 22 LR and 40 S&W. And here's the part a lot of people don't want to hear. Rimfire calibers like the 22 LR are involved in more deaths than almost any other round. That's not a guess. That's straight from the CDC. Now 9mm, no surprise there. I carry it, you probably carry it, and every police department I've worked with or trained beside uses it. It's easy to shoot, holds more rounds, and it works. I've sold thousands of 9mm pistols, and for good reason. But here's where it gets messy. It's also the caliber most commonly used in homicides. Not because it's somehow more lethal than other rounds, but because it's everywhere. It's the most popular carry round in America. And yeah, bad guys use it too. The ATF's trace data backs that up. Year after year, 9mm pistols are the most recovered crime guns. You don't need a 45 round to take someone down. Shot placement and frequency matter way more. Now let's talk about 22 LR, or that little round everybody underestimates. I grew up shooting 20s in the backyard, and I've probably put more rounds of 20s downrange than anything else. But here's the deal. The 22 LR is involved in thousands of deaths every year. Not just from accidents and suicides, but homicides too. The controversial part? A lot of folks don't even think it should be taken seriously. They call it a quote-unquote varmint round or a beginner's gun, but the CDC's own stats show it racks up huge numbers because it's so common. Cheap guns, small frames, easy to conceal. Bad guys like it for the same reasons we do. It doesn't make headlines like 9mm or 45, but it's quietly one of the most lethal rounds in the country. That's a hard pill for some folks to swallow. And then there's the 40 S&W, which is kind of the forgotten middle child these days. I carried a SIG P229 in 40 back when that was the gold standard for law enforcement. It hits harder than 9mm, but it's snappier, heavier, and a bit more expensive to shoot. When departments started switching back to 9, all those trade-in 40s flooded the market. So now you've got a ton of those pistols out there in civilian hands, and they still show up in a lot of shootings. Ballistically, it is solid, but it's mostly the volume of guns in circulation that keeps it relevant in crime data. Of course, I have to underscore that I ain't talking internet chatter. I'm talking real numbers from the FBI, CDC, and ATF. Do you know what caliber shows up in more shootings, more crime scenes, and more autopsies than anything else? 9mm. By a long shot. In 2021, the FBI reported over 13,600 gun homicides, and handguns made up more than 90% of them. The ATF's trace data? Same story. The 9mm pistols account for over a third of all recovered crime guns. It's not because 9mm is some magic bullet. As I've said, it's just everywhere. Law enforcement carries it, civilians carry it, and yeah, your common shady guys around the block carry them too. And since we've talked about that, I think it's just necessary to highlight how available the 9mm is. It's hands down the most popular pistol round in America. According to the ammo industry folks, around 60% of all handgun ammo sold is 9mm. Hell, I've sold more 9mm than I can count. Everything from Glocks and SIGs to High Points and Tauruses. It's affordable, easy to find, and even cheaper when you buy it in bulk. And 22 LR, man, that stuff's like sand. It gets into everything. They crank out billions of rounds every year, and you can still find bricks of it for like 5 to 7 cents a round. It seems that everybody has 22 lying around. It's in Grandpa's old rifle, your first pistol, whatever. That stuff's just always been part of American gun culture. Now when it comes to concealability, that's where 9mm and 22 LR really shine. Think about all the subcompact 9mm out there. The Glock 43, the SIG P365, or the Shield Plus. All of them are easy to tuck inside a waistband or ankle holster. Same thing with those little 22 pocket pistols. I've seen people carry NAA mini revolvers in their jeans coin pockets. That's why these calibers pop up in crimes. They're easy to hide and quick to use. According to the feds, most shootings happen at close range anyway, so it's not about long guns or big-bore wheel guns. It's about what you can keep hidden till it's too late. Do you think gangs are running around with 10mm or 357 Magnum? Hell no. They're using what they can get their hands on, usually cheap, stolen, compact 9mm pistols. Cities like Chicago and Philly report thousands of 9mm guns recovered every year, and more than half of them are tied to some kind of crime. Meanwhile, those little rimfire rounds slip under the radar. It ain't flashy, but it's quiet, easy to shoot, and still lethal. I've seen 22 LR loads used in drive-bys, robberies, you name it. And yeah, it's in a ton of suicides and accidental shootings too. CDC's got data showing it shows up in thousands of deaths a year. So just because a round hits hard doesn't mean it is more lethal than the others. That whole stopping power equals the deadliest caliber thing? Yeah, that's a myth we've all heard a million times. Don't get me wrong. I love a big boomin' 10mm or 44 Magnum as much as the next guy. Those things hit like a sledgehammer. A hot 10mm load will push 700 foot-pounds easily. And 44 Magnum? That's bear country medicine right there. But when you look at FBI homicide stats or the ATF's crime gun trace data, those big calibers barely even show up. They're like unicorns in actual shootings. Cool to own, fun to shoot, but rare as hell on the street. Now flip that around and take a look at the .22 LR, the soft-spoken, humble little rimfire we all learned to shoot with. On paper, it's laughable, maybe 100, 150 foot-pounds if you're lucky, but in real life it can be a killer. CDC stats from 2021 say we had over 48,000 gun deaths, and more than half of those were suicides. Guess what round shows up all the damn time? Yep, that's the .22 LR. That's the ugly truth. They're in every house, every drawer, and every tackle box across America. Cheap, quiet, easy to shoot, and plenty deadly. Dr. Vincent DeMaio, the guy who literally wrote the book on gunshot wounds, said 22 LR rounds can bounce around inside the skull like a pinball and do catastrophic damage, even when the entrance wound barely looks like anything. That stuck with me ever since I read it. Here's another one that'll ruffle some feathers. ARs and other rifles only account for less than 3% of gun homicides every year, according to the FBI's UCR data. Let that sink in. Meanwhile, handguns make up over 90% of those deaths. Now, you wouldn't know that from the news or social media. Seems like every time you turn on the TV, it's assault rifle this or tactical that. But statistically, a 150-22 LR handgun from a pawn shop is way more likely to be involved in a fatal shooting than a tricked-out 2000 AR-15. That's not me getting political. That's just what the raw numbers show. And honestly, it throws a lot of people for a loop when they see that spelled out. And I've had more than a few conversations with ER docs and trauma surgeons over the years. Most of them say the same thing. Survivability ain't about caliber. It's about where you're hit and how quickly you get help. You take a .45 bullet to the calf, you'll probably be fine. But a .22 LR to the temple? That is lights out. Some urban trauma centers have even put out studies showing that people shot with bigger calibers like 40s or 45s don't necessarily die more often than folks hit with smaller rounds. It all comes down to placement, angle, and response time, not foot-pounds or muzzle velocity. So yeah, all that terminal ballistics stuff is fun to nerd out on. I love a good gel test as much as anyone. But in the real world, that's not what's taking out most people. It's not the biggest, loudest calibers doing the most work. It's the ones that are fired the most, in the worst situations, by folks who barely know what they're doing. That's why the 9mm and .22 LR lead the pack. Not because they're the strongest on the block, but because they're everywhere all the time. That's the hard truth, and the data backs it up every single time.